I happen to love to buy things that are kind of the diamond in the rough, so to speak, shine them up and build them into companies. So that's what I've done. Anything that you can create something with and make it better, you can make money with it. So you have to have that mindset when you're actually in the business world. And that's how you become a serial entrepreneur.
What's up, guys? It's your boy, Ross Mack, and welcome to Financial Freestyle here on Yahoo Finance. Now, look, no matter where you're at in your financial journey, look no further because you're in the right place, because we're going to actually help take it to the next level, because I'm talking to some of the greatest minds in the industry. And today, I'm honored to be talking to Ms. Carolyn Aronson, stylist, founder, and CEO of It's a 10 Haircare. Thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, to the people that are watching, who is Carolyn Aronson?
Well, Carolyn Aronson, as you mentioned, stylist first, but really I'm a mother. I'm a serial entrepreneur, really. I have about 15 different brands and just have a real passion for building things. So that's who I am.
I love it. And you also are from this area, from Jersey, correct?
I actually was born in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. Didn't grow up in this area, but my parents were New Yorkers, occasionally still have the New York draw. So definitely have sometimes that New Yorkness about me.
I love it. Well, I used to live here. Obviously, I'm from Chicago, and you lived in the Midwest, so we got a little kind of reverse thing going.
That's right. We get a blend, right?
Yeah,
we get a little softness to our edge, so it's good.
So tell me, what inspired you to go into your business today?
Well, you know what? I actually started off in my own little business right behind the chair as a hairdresser. So when you're an independent contractor, you're 1099, that 4-foot little square is your business. So that's where I really started, marketing it, building it from nothing. And the mindset behind that was to eventually own a salon, which I then transitioned into. And then from there, I migrated into hair product manufacturing. So it was really a progressive career that just evolved into more things.
So, you know what I like when people are thinking about going into entrepreneurship, everybody wants the tree, but nobody actually wants to plant the roots, right? And so one of the things I did see, and I did my research, is that you've had other businesses prior to It's a 10. Obviously, you started as a stylist, but you had another business. So let's talk about what led you to being successful, but let's also talk about some of the things that may have actually, the mishaps and things along on that path.
That's right. So actually, the very first hair product brand that I created in 2000 completely failed. And we lost everything. So that was a $500,000 loss. And, that was a hard lesson. Really had to start over from scratch with virtually nothing. $80,000 to start It's a 10 Hair Care was not a lot of money to start a hair care brand. So really talking about growing the roots, that is absolutely such a key factor to any business for it to really have longevity. So I think that was some of the lessons I learned from that helped me pick the pieces up, continue on, and figure out how to really build a brand with really deep roots. And that's what we did. So
the interesting thing about losses is you always got to find a way to turn them into wins, right? And so I look at that as a $500,000 tuition at, Harvard, to speak, right? And so what were some of those lessons that helped you take It's a 10 to the next level?
There were so many lessons, but I think a lot of them had to do with the actual manufacturing process and really setting up the business properly from the get-go. So in the beginning, we really were trying to do everything ourselves, everything a la carte. And I think that's a problem with entrepreneurs sometimes. They actually try to do too much by themselves and too fast. So we had QC issues, but we had so many different vendors. We were trying to manage them all and ultimately create one bottle on the shelf consecutively. And so, maybe the sprayer guy wasn't talking to the bottle guy and the ingredient guy wasn't talking to the filler. And so a lot of the issues that happened were QC issues. And so we had, sprayers who didn't work. We had bubbling labels. We had just some of the things that you don't necessarily consider in production really kind of backfired on us. So I learned some lessons on that. And I really, I call it the Home Depot concept, everything under one roof. They were brilliant in what they created. So now if you're a contractor, I always say creating hair products is like building a house. You have to pull all your contractors together to build your vision. Creating any kind of manufacturing isn't that different. So when you have one-stop shop vendors where you can actually go in and have multiple services under one roof, it's so much more cohesive. And that's what we learned to do.
I love that. I think the statistics is like in the first 5 years, the vast majority of all entrepreneurs fail. And obviously at the 10-year mark, it's even worse. And so what advice would you give to young aspiring entrepreneurs when it comes, irrespective of the field, but like what advice would you give to them?
In general, absolutely. 18 years into it, the first advice I would give is don't listen. Don't listen to your doubters. Don't listen to the people who tell you you can't or you won't. And ultimately, think about the possibilities. So always think big, but also basically dot your I's, cross your T's, have your proper contracts in place. Hire the trademark attorneys. Get the proper people to advise you, possibly the legal team behind you. That's actually going to help you set up your little tiny business from the get-go properly. Because you know what? Sometimes they grow up, like my brand did. When I started this company, I certainly didn't think that we would be in 117 countries.
Wow.
18 years later, It's a Ten is just one of my brands. I have 15 companies now. So, you know what? There's a lot of things to cover. And when you're just starting out, you kind of forget about those things, but they're crucial.
Well, obviously the name of this is Financial Freestyle. So we got to talk about the finances of things. Did you have any big financial mistakes that you may have learned from along your path over 18 years or obviously in your first few ventures?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest one was the first company completely failing. But there was a point where we were pretty much self-funded along the way. But there was a point we got into a little bit of trouble. We had to go to the bank, take out a loan, which I wasn't really a fan of. I really wanted to grow it very steadily, slowly building on itself. And so when we did that, we had to go, make sure we got proper funding. But of course, anything you borrow, you have to pay back. And that's the reality of it. If you want to build a stable business, understand that just taking in more money all the time isn't the answer. So learning how to really build it on itself and help fund itself rather than always taking in partners. Sorry, Shark Tank. It's not always the answer. Sometimes maybe growing a little bit more steadily and slowly is a better way.
You know what's interesting? I was actually going to ask about that, right? I had a venture capitalist on our last episode or 2 episodes prior to this. And it's interesting because most founders, you got 2 ways of raising capital, right? You can go to the bank, get a loan, or you could actually give equity in your company. So what made you at that point say, you know what, I don't want to give up any ownership. Instead, I'll rather borrow money. And obviously I got to pay them back, but
that's right.
I'll rather take that chance than actually give up any piece of my pie right now.
Well, I think you have to remember that giving up equity is giving up some power. And it's also, partnerships are like marriages. So you have to realize when you get into that kind of business relationship with someone, they're owning a piece of you. So that was just something that I didn't think was a great idea. I started the company with a partner. In 2017, I completely bought him out. I am one of the only female-owned, Latina-owned, 100% owned brands in the world. So, and I've worked very hard for that. And so it's just not something, everyone's different, My mindset is not to have a lot of partners. Now, some of the additional brands that I've started now, I do have partners in. But It's a 10 is, to me, the mothership. And so really these other brands are kind of built somewhat on the back of what I've learned from It's a 10,
So let's actually go into that, right? Some of those other brands, right? I think it's amazing it's very admirable what you're doing. And obviously the fact that you're continuing to expound, right? You're not getting complacent. You're obviously still growing. You say you have 15 other businesses?
Many businesses.
So you're a serial entrepreneur. So let's actually talk about some of those. How did you go from, hair care to whether it's entertainment, music, production, or aviation? Like, help me out. How did you actually
You
get
know
there?
what? I mean, after being an entrepreneur for as long as I have been, you really learn a lot of the tools that it takes to start a business, run a business, and keep one afloat successfully. And so over the years, really some of my interests, my passions have done that. I'm in real estate. I've always flipped real estate since I was in my 20s. It helped fund my very first company that failed. So, when you have passions for things, learn how to actually excel in them and then turn them into businesses. I happen to love to buy things that are kind of the diamond in the rough, so to speak, shine them up and build them into companies. So that's what I've done. I have an airplane that I gutted and remodeled, and now it's, chartered. I had a boat. I did the same thing with it. It's a yacht, but people call it boats, right? I call it boat. And so, anything that you can improve
like
on.
50 feet difference between a boat and yacht.
Yes, definitely. So ultimately, anything that you can basically make better within an industry, within actually the item itself. Anything that you can create something with and make it better, you can make money with it. So you have to have that mindset when you're actually in the business world. And that's how you become a serial entrepreneur. I happen to love music. My partner loves music. And so, we started a record label. And we have a lot of friends within that industry, and it was just very organic for us. I also created multiple hair care brands. I have a makeup line. I have a hair extensions line. Recently started in the men's grooming industry. Started it's called Rewind at 10, a hair and beard color, raising the bar within that sector for men. And I partnered with Fat Joe and my partner, Jeff Aronson, on that, my husband. So really, anytime you can bring something to an industry that's going to make it better, you too can live the American dream. That's the reality of it.
I love that. Look, guys, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you come back. I'm sitting here with Carolyn Aronson, CEO, founder of It's a 10. All right, guys, welcome back to Financial Freestyle, and I'm sitting here with none other than Carolyn Aronson. So look, one thing that's just so prevalent now is everybody and their auntie is an entrepreneur, right? You turn on social media, don't work the 9 to 5, become an entrepreneur, right? And I think that leads a lot of people astray. So maybe you could give some insight on that.
I agree with you 1,000%. First of all, everyone's a CEO right now. You look on LinkedIn, it's like CEO. Okay. But ultimately, I agree with you because the determination and grit is one thing, but having the ability to stay the course and to withstand time is a whole nother thing. As you mentioned, I think within the first few years, most businesses fail. I think that really to be within the top 1 or 2%, it's a whole different mindset. And it's more than just persistence, perseverance, all the P's, right? They talk about those. I think the people that are in the top few percent just don't think the same. We think outside of the box. We think really, really big. And we also tend to think in a way, I think that the average person doesn't really comprehend because we don't have the average fear. I think most people actually think they want to be an entrepreneur, but then when it gets time to put on the big boy pants, they get scared. And they aren't willing to take those risks. The risks are endless. When I first started out, the risks were in the thousands. The risks I take today are in the hundreds of thousands. Risks never go away when you're an entrepreneur. So if you have the mindset that you're going to be constantly, if I could just get to here. If I could just get another $50,000 to do this with it. Or, then all my problems will be solved. No. The problems don't go away. They just get more zeros after them. And so, but ultimately, that's exciting to me. I actually love to take risk. So I think people that have, really, really, truly successful entrepreneurs almost have an oblivion to the average thing that most people do. So it's just very different.
I love that, right? Like to a degree, you're on a spectrum, right? Where it's like courage and insanity when you're really betting on yourself. And on top of that, you got the naysayers saying, oh, don't do that. You're not going to be successful. And to that point, you're like, I'm the only one that's still believing. And so now at your maturity in terms of all your businesses, what's giving you that courage to still say, you know what? Sure, it's a 6-figure risk, but I'm gonna still keep betting on myself.
Well, actually, the more successful you get, the easier it is, right? Because now I have the deep pockets, and I have the relationships, and I have the buying power. I mean, these are all things I didn't have originally. I was just a little guy no one believed in. So now I can walk into a room and negotiate real big contracts because I have those relationships and those buying powers. So truthfully, it's really in the beginning as to when you have to have that oblivion. You have to. It's even more so than just, I believe in myself. It is literally, you don't even think the way the average person thinks. It doesn't even ruffle your feathers to literally figure out, and I mean figure out because you're constantly figuring out. I'm still figuring out to this day. That's what we do for a living. We put out fires, we figure out a way, and we learn how to zig when they're zagging. That's what entrepreneurs do. So that mindset has to be there from the beginning, and you really have to get over some really big challenges that maybe you never even thought were going to come your way. What happens over the years is you become more attuned to them, you become better at navigating them, and like I mentioned, you've got the money and the relationships to really do it quickly.
Well, to the average viewer, they probably can't relate to, how you scaled, and now you have the buying power, now you have the Rolodex, right? The network that could actually help a business. But when we're thinking about scaling, right? Once again, we talked about being able to go to the bank, finance, or actually raise equity. But one of the things you talked about earlier was the fact that you actually leverage your real estate,
that's right,
your portfolio early on for your very first business, right? And so let's actually talk about that. And the reason I say it is because now, right, people, you might be able to get an SBA loan, you do this, you do that, but I don't know if that was—
Or bring in venture. I mean, people, listen, there's minority venture capitalists out there would love to invest in minority businesses. But yeah, you know what? My mindset was, I was a scrapper. So I figured out how to flip things. And I started young flipping cars when I first started driving. I was always flipping everything. Buy low, sell high. Basic economics. That's what you should do in life. From the moment you start working. So anything that you're acquiring, maybe figure out how maybe you could sell it for equal or more later. So buy it low. And so really I started doing that with real estate in my 20s. My very first condo was an apartment that converted into a condo, and I really fixed it up. I mean, I made it cute for young people because they were the only people living there. And so I really gave it a nice flair, and I ended up flipping it for a profit. And then I just started doing that in real estate. And another thing I did, you know what? I lived to my means. I drove old cars. I bought a really good condition one, but I had one car for 10 years, but I was buying real estate. You see, it's a priority. How can you invest into things that are going to make you money, not just cost you money? And so that mindset led me to have the ability to really invest in my first salon. I put up my condo as collateral. The bank was like, not going to hand me $150,000. I literally had that much equity in my home at the time and wrote it off. Now you're putting up your entire life, your whole savings at that point, and your home. I could have lost everything, but I've just done that again and again and again in my lifetime. I'm still doing it now.
Wow, that's so remarkable. All right, so let's actually talk to the entrepreneurs again, right? Obviously, to become a successful entrepreneur, it's a mindset thing, right? To have longevity, you obviously have to, once again, you're on a spectrum of being insane as well as extremely right place, right time. But let's actually talk about kind of what maybe are the 5 things a person needs to do from a checklist standpoint. Is it business plan? Is it, you found a competitive advantage or this? Like, what would you say to that young entrepreneur starting out? Like, look, this is what you definitely have to do in order to be successful.
Well, I think first of all, make sure whatever market you're going into, research it. Make sure there's a need for it. Make sure it's something that people will desire. Is there something within that industry that you can make better? That's number one. So make sure what you're actually driving towards is actually going to be a very viable thing within our society. People have a lot of great ideas, but sometimes, you know what? People just aren't interested in them. So that's number one. And then from there, as I mentioned before, making sure when you start a company, start it up. when you make sure it's properly set up. Make sure you do the legal things properly, because you never know. Eventually, maybe it's only a year or two down the road, it could be worth a lot of money. And if you haven't done things properly, there are people that can take it from you if it's not properly set up. So, there's just a lot of things business-wise that you should educate yourself about. And not only that, be willing to educate yourself on maybe some things that you don't even really know about. Accounting, business law. Go take some basic courses, because those are things that are going to help you run your business. I was very fortunate to have a father that actually gave me a wonderful foundation in business mindset. So he always told me, certain things like pay yourself first, which means make sure you save and make sure you build your empire. It's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have. That was the mindset. He also sat me down and taught me how to use Quicken and then QuickBooks.
Wow.
Those things I use to this day. I did my own taxes. He taught me how to do my own taxes. I was an independent contractor. I was 1099. I had to pay quarterlies. I had to make sure I had medical insurance. Learning those basic things within a business rather than just hiring people to do it helps you to understand how your own business runs. And you should have a tab on your own business at all times. Know how to read a balance sheet. Know how to read a P&L. Know what EBITDA is. Understand your machine and how it runs. And that will help you set your business up and keep it running.
I love that. So obviously, if you could go back in time, right, what advice are you giving to 18-year-old Carolyn?
Oh my goodness. 18-year-old Carolyn, I think as I mentioned before, is the sky is the limit. And so prepare yourself for what can come. I always say, put yourself in the way of success. And you can start doing that at 18 years old. So much of success is really what you learn along the way, because you're constantly learning. And you know what? I always say, fly like an eagle, you don't flock with the seagulls, right? Surround yourself with the people who actually you can learn from, who are already successful, who are where you wish you could be someday. That's who you need to hang out with. And literally live and breathe it. My husband jokes, he says, I'm married to the world's biggest sponge. That's what he describes me as. And that mindset, when you're constantly just soaking up around you what you can learn and how you can be better. I'm still being better, trying to be better every day. It's part of it.
I love it. What advice do you give when it comes to balance, right? You're a mogul while simultaneously being in a family, a mother of 5. Let's talk about how you find balance.
Yeah, and especially for women, it can be a real challenge. Originally, when I started my first companies, they were run from my home. And so that mindset, really maybe finding something that you can do where you're partially at home, or at least making sure that you have a supportive team around you, asking for help. Women, we always think we can do it all, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. So setting up that system that can give you that support, especially as you grow, because, and listen, being there for my family is a major, major importance to me. Like I was just telling, my friend here, there's not a time where I don't pick up my phone when my kids call or my husband calls. I may cut them off short, like, hey, okay, it's not time to chat about that. But just making sure you're there for them as well. And so that balance is asking for help.
I love that. Well, listen, guys, I want to say thank you guys for joining, but more importantly, a really special thank you to Ms. Carolyn Aronson. Make sure you guys are here next week. Once again, thanks for joining us here on Financial Freestyle. It's your boy, Ross Mack, and I'll see you guys here next week.
Thank you, Ross.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.